Evening, folks. We are waiting for a few people to arrive, and then we'll get started. Hello. We had nearly 100 people confirmed to attend this, so we're at about 31 attendees. We're going to give it a couple minutes for people to arrive. Thanks for your patience as we get things going. Hello, Amik. Can we unmute her? All right, can I do it? Oh, here we go.
Hi.
Nice to hear your voice.
Yeah, good to hear yours too.
All right, folks, we're going to get going. We've got 33 people arrived now. The rest who arrive will catch this midstream. It's also being recorded for posterity. So we're going to get going. All right, so let's go ahead and start this. Let's see, display settings, and let's switch this. Okay, good. Excellent. All right, so the talk we're going to have tonight is about why it's hard to get a job in today's climate and what to do about it. We're doing great at the school, satisfied students, people are still getting jobs, but let's just face it, it's a really interesting time. For those of you who are listening to this as a recording, we're recording this in September 2020, or the year that never was, or the year that we're going to pretend never existed. So things are a bit different right now, and we're acknowledging that. We want to provide as much help as we can to our current students to be able to navigate this. So that's what this talk is about. So let's go ahead and get started. This is our agenda for the day. We're going to have an introduction. We're going to discuss some of the challenges that are facing people in today's job search climate and give you tools that you can use to control the situation. We're going to start that in general with just job searches and some fundamental truths about how the job search works. But then we're going to get into some specific tips on how to navigate the current environment in terms of your job search. When we're through all of that, we're going to revisit the challenges we looked at the very beginning to make sure we've addressed everything that's come up as some of the challenges facing people in the current situation. Then we're going to discuss some next steps you can take to be able to have a really good job search experience. And finally, some closing remarks. So let's get started. So the first thing I want to let you know is that I'm the co-founder of the Tech Academy, but I'm also a working developer. And as a working developer, I understand the challenge that you're in. I'm living through COVID and wildfires here in Oregon and all sorts of situations that 2020 has brought to us. And so I'm not immune to the effects, and I have experienced them myself. So I do know what I'm talking about when it comes to this. It's not theoretical knowledge, it's hard-won, painful knowledge at times. The thing I want to have you look at as a central point is that we do know how to get the job done at the Tech Academy. And that's not just in terms of technical training, but in terms of how to get a job. The amount of work and experience that has gone into the job placement course and all the personnel that are there is incalculable. And we do know the routine. Yes, we have a special situation that we're dealing with right now, but we do have the fundamentals down really well at the school, and we can help you navigate this current situation. And the topmost thing to keep in mind is that it is not impossible to get that first job, and you are in charge of it. Now, at times it can seem like the situation can make you the effect of what's going on, that you're not in control of certain things. And there are, to be sure, things that you're not going to be able to grab a hold of and control. But there's so much you can control. And overall, in terms of the job search, your success getting that first position and your success with your career going forward, you are in charge of that. The trick is to find out the things that you can do about it, and then to be conscientious and diligent in doing those things. So what are the challenges we're facing right now in September 2020 in this bizarre year? Obviously, there's, prime suspect number one, COVID and coronavirus and whatever other names you have for it. This is something that's greatly affected many aspects of how we all live in our day-to-day lives. But obviously, it's had some effect on the job search in terms of hiring trends, in terms of how to actually go about the physical universe actions to get hired, to be able to do your interviews, to be able to do your coding challenges, to be able to have those whiteboard presentations. A lot of things we took for granted, we can't take for granted anymore. One of the other challenges we're facing is the fact that if you're going to have a networking situation or any kind of a meetup, that's going to be an online situation. In-person meetups are highly frowned upon right now. So how do you navigate that in a job search? Another thing that is always true, but I do want to call out because it's something that comes up quite often, is it just seems like when you look at a job description, they want tons of experience. I actually saw a really fun meme about this on Facebook just today, where someone was posting an actual screenshot of a job description that was asking for 10 to 12 years of experience in a technology called Kubernetes, Kubernetes. In brief, Kubernetes is a technology for managing the creation, modification, and destruction of tiny individual computer programs that are distributed in the cloud. That's what Kubernetes is. It orchestrates a huge group of tiny individual computer programs that all work together to get a job done. So that's Kubernetes. So that's great. They asked for 10 to 12 years of experience in Kubernetes. It's wonderful, except that Kubernetes was created 5 years ago. So you look at things like that, and you look at job descriptions that have everything in the kitchen sink thrown at them, and they want 50 years of experience, and it can be very, very challenging, overwhelming. There are also rumors about tech jobs declining, and we get hit with this kind of stuff, and you're out there in the job market looking around. Anything we hear that makes you think, wow, are jobs drying up? Are there hiring freezes? Are there situations where I'm not going to have as much of an opportunity? That can be a real challenge, including hiring freezes. There are, in fact, certain companies that have done exactly that. We're not hiring anybody. They had a bit of a knee-jerk, understandably, a knee-jerk reaction when this COVID thing first hit, and some of them haven't actually opened up hiring. That can be a situation. And the fact that you're doing remote education, all of our students are remote at this point. That's obviously going to limit your interaction. You can only discuss, database structure with your cat so often before you realize you're not going to get anywhere in terms of social interaction. So all joking aside, this is a real factor, because when you get on the job, it is a social activity. Software development is a group activity. And that social and group interaction that you might expect from some sort of an in-person learning experience is just impossible. You can't do it right now. So how do you control this situation? How do you make it so that you actually are if not calling the shots 100%, at least you've got enough things you know you can do about it that you feel like you can ultimately best the situation and come out on top with a job. The first thing I want to mention, and probably the most important thing to take away from this entire talk, we're going to go into a lot of things, don't worry, but the most important thing that I feel you should take away from this talk is do what works. The effective job search actions that you can take won't ever change. Yes, the situation we're all living through is real. I'm not trying to just negate it and say there's no problem or no challenge. There are. But the number of things you have to adopt as an unusual solution, if you will, to the situation we're facing, they're actually quite small. The things to fall back on are the tried and true proven actions that will get you the job. Those things won't change. The mechanical way you might need to do those could have some effect right now or could be affected, but the fundamentals won't change. And we're going to talk about some of those. Another thing that you can do to control the situation is embrace failure. Now, what do we mean by that? Well, let's just go back to something we've probably all heard all of our lives, or if you've gone through our job placement training, you've heard, you got to get used to being told no. Now, it's not fun for anybody. I'm not going to pretend that, I get all super excited when somebody says, I'm not going to hire you for a job, or when you get rejected for something. Come on, we're human. But what I mean by embrace failure is acknowledge the fact, and it is a fact, that is part of the job search process. And you are, in fact, going to hear no over and over and over and over again. And each time you hear a no, it means you got far enough into the process that someone actually had to make a decision about you. That itself is actually a good thing. If you never even get a chance to go to the dance, does it matter? Or do you arrive there and get a chance to dance and make a fool of yourself? Not that I'm reliving my high school years, all right? But all joking aside, the fact is that every single time you get a no, truthfully, it's going to sound like some kind of truism, but it's true. You have an opportunity to analyze what happened, figure out what you did right that even got you that far, and what didn't go quite the way you wanted, and show you things you might need to do to pivot and be able to ultimately succeed. Now, I'm not saying this second bullet point here, embrace failure, I'm not saying that's easy. I don't like to get rejected. It stinks, but it is going to happen. Know that it's part of the process. It's okay. You are absolutely not going to have a 100% success rate with apply for a single job and get that job. No one does that. So another thing that you can do to control the situation is acknowledge the fact that you're absolutely going to have imposter syndrome. Now, for those of you who've done our job placement course, you're familiar with reading about this. For those of you who haven't, in a nutshell, it's basically the idea that you're essentially a fraud, that you're all really waiting for is for someone to ask the right series of questions or poke the right holes in your level of understanding for them to realize, man, this guy, this girl, they don't know what they're talking about, and they should never even be hired as a junior developer, and man, what the heck are they thinking even knocking on the door and asking for a job? So here's the thing. That feeling never goes away. I've been coding since I was 11 years old. Every single time I get a new project that includes the majority of it is a brand new technology or a series of technologies, and I just say, okay, yeah, I can do that, a part of me still goes, man, I don't actually know how to do that. And when they see that I don't, they're going to look at me and think, senior dev? Are you kidding? What's up with that, Eric? It's almost impossible for that feeling to ever 100% go away. That's my experience. Your mileage may vary. You may arrive at a point where you're like, I got this. And so that's wonderful. My experience has been otherwise, and the experience of our graduates has been otherwise. You're always going to have a feeling like that. Recognize that every competent technology worker lives with that and has moved through that. So none of them are actually going to expect you to know everything. And every single one of them, if they're a decent human being, is going to understand that and will be communicating with you and dealing with you and interacting with you with that same understanding that they felt that way too, and probably still do at times. The other thing you can do to control the situation and this is probably number 2 on my list of like takeaways. You're gonna have to really get intense on your tenacity, your stick-to-itiveness, your unceasing every single day being doing something, or hopefully several somethings effective on your job search. It may take a greatly increased amount of effort to get that job. It probably will, actually. But part of being able to be in charge or control the situation is just being willing to experience that, just knowing that that is in fact the case, that you're actually going to have to work harder. You're going to have to work hard. I myself have actually had to get a job during this period. And there's a specific reason why. It relates to this hiring freeze thing. We'll get to that specific story in a moment. But I have done a job search during this COVID-19, whatever you're going to call it, and I got hired. And I know what it takes to get through it. And those first and fourth bullet points probably sum it up. I know what works. I know what the effective job search actions are, and I didn't change those, even given the weird situation we're living through. And I was absolutely tenacious. I'll tell you a bit more about it in a moment. Another thing you can do to control the situation. Now, this is one of the things that is true in all times, but right now, especially when you aren't going to have the face-to-face conversations with people, communicate a lot. Now, that communication can take a lot of forms. Sending out a resume is a form of communication. Calling into a company and finding out whether or not they're hiring and just maybe haven't posted it anywhere is a form of communication. Following up on something you've sent is a communication. Going to some networking opportunity, even if it's online, and being willing to put yourself out there and ask a question is communication. The essential thing I'm asking you to look at here is, are you willing to send something out into the world knowing you might get rejected, knowing that you might get embarrassed, knowing it might not even be acknowledged? If you're willing to do that and persist in doing that, never stop communicating about who you are, what you're interested in, what you're trying to get done, the technologies you love, the kind of workplace you like. Never stop communicating during this entire process. And you will want to. You'll get one, just the straw that broke the camel's back in terms of yet another rejection, or the person, the recruiter said they were going to get back to you in 3 days, and it's been a week and they haven't gotten back to you, and you just want to crawl in a hole and die. Communicate, especially when you're feeling defeated or, really down over the whole thing. Find something you can do to communicate. When I say double down on tenacity, it's one of the key things you can do. How can I get outside of myself, not stuck in my head, and communicate with someone about anything related to technology? So when in doubt, communicate. And finally, no man is an island. Work with us, work with the school, work with your fellow students. You are not in this alone. Obviously, the job placement personnel, they are 100% invested in you guys getting hired. The entire reason we put the school here is so that people can get hired in technology, not so people can get trained in technology. So people can get hired. And I think one of the funnest and most gratifying jobs in this entire company is that job placement piece. When Jack and I were the only people working for the school, that was the part we loved the most. Man, when you get that phone call because the guy or the girl got the job and they're just out of their head, there's nothing like that. And we would fight for that with people. Well, our current job placement personnel are just like that. They love to see you succeed. They share in your successes. They also share in your setbacks when things don't go as well. They take it personally, and they really, really want you to get the job. Work with them. You are absolutely not alone. But listen to them. And we'll get into that in a moment. So the job search in general. This is what I was just referring to. Everything you need to know to get a job is actually in the materials for the job placement course. Now, some of you are at various points in your progress through the course, and you have, through the overall training, whatever boot camp you signed up for, and you haven't yet gotten to the job placement course. That's fine. If you're one of those students and you're watching this and you're not even towards the end of your program, hey, kudos to you. That's fantastic. Get this data now, start thinking with it, and when you get towards the end and you're working on job placement, maybe even review it, because it's going to be made available to everybody. Review this right when you're about to get on your job search. Hopefully by the time you get there, the COVID thing is like moderated or We've got something under control a little bit better, but who knows? We just don't know. So when you get to that point, review this material. But the point is, we know how to get people jobs, and we put everything that we know inside those job placement courses, or the course materials. It's an incredible wealth of knowledge, because it isn't theoretical. Every single thing in there is based on getting hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, maybe even thousands of people hired at this point. So when in doubt, fall back to your materials and review them. And I give you some specifics as we go through. Another thing about job search in general, there really is no substitute for your hard work and persistence. I'm not going to kid you. It's tough to get hired even when we don't have a situation like we have now. And it's kind of ironic, because we've got a situation where for the past 15 years, actually ever since about 2003, when we started to recover from the .net, the .com crash in the very, very early 2000s. I know some of you were probably born around then, but look up the .net or that .com crash. It's a lot of fun. But the point is, from about 2003 forward, we've had a situation where the number of technology jobs currently available and then forecasted 5 or 10 years into the future has exceeded the available talent and the ability of the available training institutions to produce talent by a wide margin. When Jack and I started the school back in 2013, we were doing some initial discussions. Then 2014, we opened. What we were operating off of was an incredible amount of census work, if you will, done on the job market by the Bureau of Labor and Statistics of the US government. And they had forecast in 2012, when they published their findings, that between then, 2012, and 10 years from then, 2022, which seemed a long ways away, but doesn't now, in that 10 years, they had forecast there would be 1.4 million new technology jobs created. Remember that, 2012, they said in the next 10 years, 1.4 million new jobs will be created. At that point in 2012, there was no such thing as a coding boot camp. The first one started mid-2012 in San Francisco. So they're making those predictions without the contribution of boot camps. They didn't even exist. And what they were saying was that the available output of new technology workers, which were only coming from universities at the time, was about 40,000 a year, or 400,000 over that 10-year period, which means if we need 1.4 million new technology workers in that decade, and we can only produce 400,000, we got a problem. We're a million upside down. So we looked at that and went, okay, all right, we're moving into the right industry. Jump forward to about 2017, and they did a 5-year update of that research. And it was the exact same numbers. It was within a few 100,000 of that exact same order of magnitude. And the only thing that had changed was that the colleges had slightly stepped up their game, and in about 2017 to 2018 timeframe had started to produce around 50,000 graduates a year instead of 40,000. Meanwhile, boot camps, which didn't exist, were producing about 35,000 graduates a year from nothing. But still, you put those together, you got what, 80,000 graduates a year? And over 10 years, we'll produce 800,000. We're still upside down. So I'm telling you all this to let you know that even though we have a job market like that, even though we have a technology sector in this country and frankly around the world that just does not stop and is constantly adding new things in society that require lots and lots of workers, even though we're in that situation, you cannot just walk into a job. It's not a cakewalk for anyone. Even the absolute best and most experienced of us have to work really hard to get hired. Now, why is that? It's because you're a knowledge worker. You are a technology professional who has a specific skill set, and especially if you've been on the job for a while, has moved into a relatively loosely defined but still cohesive area that you are skilled and expert in. It can be very narrow and you're just really awesome at databases. You can be more of a general kind of thing and say you're a really good web developer. But the point is, you work with a certain body of technologies and you've worked at certain companies in certain types of industries, and they're just flat out are going to be companies that you're not a fit for. They're maybe in a completely specialized business domain that you just don't have the required previous knowledge for. Or they may do web development, but they use a completely different set of technologies, and it would be a really, really hard fit to make it work. And they find someone else who just has already been working in those. The point is that there's a lot of reasons why you're not going to get the job. So it doesn't matter if there's like tons and tons of them out there. You're not just going to walk in and get one. I'm not telling you all this to get you down and defeated. It's just to be real about what actually exists out there. You can get hired, but the amount of hard work, persistence, stick-to-itiveness is almost that's needed to get the job, especially your first job, is almost always underestimated by our students and graduates. And we have phenomenal students, phenomenal graduates. If you came into this program, if you're a student at this school, man, you're bright and driven, and you've got what it takes to get through. We don't let people into this program that aren't going to succeed. But even given that, and even given an internal like discipline and knowledge that you're capable of working hard, that you might arrive to this with, you will be tested when it comes to getting a job. I'm bringing this up. I'm really, I'm trying to belabor this point, but there's a thing to realize. Even though we have the situation we have, and there are some very real factors that'll make it challenging to get a job, the actual reason why it's challenging to get a job is not going to be found in COVID-19 or wildfires or any other thing going on. It's, are you willing to be stopped? Are you willing to descend down into, man, maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I made the wrong decision. Maybe I just don't have what it takes. If you're willing to do that and stay there and not pop out of it after a little while, that is why you won't get the job. And that's a very brutal thing to say. And I'm not saying it to be mean at all. I'm saying it because I have been there. I have dropped down into depths of like, oh my goodness, what's wrong? Why can't I get hired? Is there something wrong with my skill set? Have I like screwed up my resume somehow? Are there just not jobs there? I have these moments. We all do. And it's okay to have them. But if you don't just pick yourself up by the scruff of your neck, dust yourself off, and go, all right, for those of you who are of a certain age, you'll recognize this phrase, once more into the breach, means attack again, okay? If you're not willing to do that, to dust yourself off and just jump back into it, you're not going to make it. And you yourself will know in your heart of hearts that you didn't stick to it hard enough. And again, it's a brutal thing to hear. I'm not saying it to drive people away, but simply to have a correct estimation of the amount of hard work and persistence it actually takes to get that job. The rewards are phenomenal. Guys and girls, the rewards are amazing. When you have been working in technology for just a few years, man, you get to choose the direction of your career. You get to be paid really, really well. You get great benefits. You're working with really, really awesome peers. You get to be on really cool projects. You're creative. You're a contributing member of our, of whatever nation you happen to live in. You're paying taxes in a great way. You're like, this is a good life, man. If you're looking for an ideal career from a lot of points of view, a technology career is ideal. It's just that it's hard to get in. Even given the rise of boot camps, it's hard to get in. But you can do it. And the key to it is right there on that second line. There's absolutely no substitute for your hard work and persistence. Do not give up. Get knocked down, get beaten a little bit, but stand up and keep going. All right. Now, another thing that people fall into is they're looking at job listings or companies and they prejudge the job and they automatically decide that's not for me or it's not going to work because or. And you're gonna see some material on the job placement course when you arrive at it, or for those of you who've already studied, you know what I'm talking about here, is that don't filter out, except with a very wide net, the jobs that you're going to apply for. If you're absolutely clearly not the right fit for the job, great. But the fact is that, we've talked about some of this already, the people writing these job descriptions are, one, usually not the people who actually are trying to hire you. Let that sink in. The people writing the job descriptions aren't the people trying to hire you. The person who really wants to hire you is that team lead, that head of development, that head of engineering, the technology professional that needs to fill some need on his or her team. That's who's trying to hire you. Yes, you're going to go through whatever mechanism that company has set up to be able to hire and onboard people, but they aren't actually hiring you. They're a necessary part of the process, but they're not technology workers. By the way, just rip the cover off of some of this stuff. The people that work in HR and work in personnel that have to hire technology workers, I've worked with many of them over the years, and you talk about imposter syndrome, man. It's such a hard thing for them. They're experts in organization, in networking, in establishing relationships, in conforming to policy, in human resources stuff. They are 1,000% not experts at technology, and they are surrounded by terms that they don't understand, and concepts and that they're not familiar with, and it's a big sea of confusion for them. And yet they're supposed to figure out whether or not you're the right fit for the job. It's very tough on them. I have a lot of understanding and sympathy for them. In fact, I've worked with a lot of them over the years to help sort out some of those things and give them some of the fundamentals of technology, just so they can actually know the arena they're operating in. But most of them won't have that. And what they're going to do when they try to advertise a job is they're going to meet with whoever is actually needing you, whoever's actually got the business need that's driving increasing headcount, if you will. And they're going to say, okay, what kind of person do you need? And they're going to write down whatever they get from that person, or it comes in an email, and half of what the person tells them, they're not going to understand. And every single thing they hear from them, they're going to take as, oh, this is a must-have. I need to find a person that has every single one of these things. But the person who's hiring you, they just want a competent developer who can think like a software engineer, who's willing to learn, and who's got tenacity and does not give up. That's what they're actually looking for. But they don't know how to put that in the job description. So they're going to list off some of the technologies they're working with, and maybe some of the kind of projects they're thinking about putting the person on, and what technologies will be involved in those projects. And they're going to give them to the HR person, the human resources person, and that human resources person is going to list them out and make a kitchen sink job requirement. Now, you're not privy to all that stuff. All you're looking at is some job posting on Indeed or Glassdoor or wherever you're looking, and you see 10 or 15 different bullet point items, and it says, must know all of these things. And you're like, come on, there's no way. Well, guess what? There isn't any way. When I look at job descriptions, and I've got a very wide body of technology that I know at this point. I've been coding professionally for about 20 years, and I know a lot of stuff at this point. And when I look at the job description, even if it's right in my wheelhouse, like the kind of work I've been doing a lot over the last 10 or 15 years that I know really, really well, they'll list off sometimes as 10 or 15 or 20 different items on this thing. And the fact is, I actually know maybe half of them really, really well. And then they list some things where I'm like, I kind of know what it is. Maybe I've bumped up against it once in a while. I know I can figure it out when I get on the job, but I can't present that I've got 5 or 10 years of experience in that and I know everything about it and I could teach you all about it. I can't. And I apply for the job anyway. I don't prejudge that. And you shouldn't either. Now that's, again, you're new to this industry. I get it. You're brand new. You're like, I just need my foot in the door. And if I see a job description that doesn't explicitly say wanted entry-level developer with 0 to 1 years of experience, if I see anything besides that, Eric, I'm scared of it. Don't be. If you're at the job placement portion of this program, of your training already, then you'll probably understand a bit of what I'm talking about. For those of you who aren't there yet and are in the middle of the boot camp, or maybe right at the beginning, I understand we've got some people that just signed up who are on this call. Know that as you go through your boot camp, you're going to learn not just a bunch of really cool tools to put in your tool belt as a software developer, but you're going to learn the types of tools you should know as a software developer, the categories of technologies you should know as a technology worker. And you are, of course, going to learn one or two examples of each of those categories, each of those types of tools, which is great because you're going to use them to do real world work during your boot camp. But what's also given to you is, for a category or type of tool, what is that tool all about? Why do we even have it? Never mind a specific example of it. What does that tool operate like? How does that tool operate? What's behind it? Why do we do this? Because when you get on the job, you're probably not going to find a job that has a perfect match with every single one of the specific technologies that you've learned throughout the boot camp, whatever boot camp you're on. But you are going to find that in every single technology job that you're looking at, they will be using one or more examples of each of those types of tools. And you're going to know what that type of tool is and how it works. Not the specific one they happen to use, fine. You know what that kind of thing is. You're going to be able to navigate that. So this is a rather long-winded comment on this don't prejudge the job, but it's very important. The thing I said earlier, you go back up here, when in doubt, communicate. This is a key part of that. And the one at the top here, do what works. This is a key part of it. One of the key things you need to learn when you're applying for these jobs is don't prejudge it. If you have any slightest interest in a job or in a company, or you see one single technology on it where you're like, oh, I know that technology, or I know another example of the technology, throw your hat in the ring. Send it out. All right. Now, let's get specific here. Yes, COVID-19 has affected the job market, but the job market is actually weak only in a few select areas. It's actually strong in all others. Here's what I observed in my own personal experience of the last 6 months, where I've been really active in both working and then not working, and then having to get hired again and now working. There are certain industries that were actually affected by this thing to a much greater degree than others. And now I'll tell you a little bit of a story. So at the beginning of the year, I was working for a company that worked or that operated in the airline industry. More specifically, what they did is arrange for reservations for both hotels and transportation for about 80 of the top airlines in the country, if not the world. Which means on any given day, they would process between 75,000 and 300,000 individual reservations or changes to reservations. 75,000 to 150,000 of these a day. And that company, whenever they would make a reservation on behalf of a crew member for an airline, for either a hotel or a taxi or a shuttle or whatever, they would get a tiny small cut of that. That's how they made their income. Well, what do you think happened between March 15th and say April 15th or April 20th? Their income dropped by 95%. It's brutal. It's absolutely brutal, because that element of our society was greatly affected. And you can probably think of other things that were greatly affected by this COVID-19 thing. But you can also look at other areas that were greatly infected in a positive way. 2 weeks ago, Amazon announced that they were hiring another 30,000 people in America. And I happen to know, because of the number of emails I get from Amazon in my inbox, that a big chunk of the people they're hiring are technology workers, developers, engineers, project managers, product managers, quality assurance personnel, all these different types of technology-related jobs, any one of which you will be able to do when you graduate, they're hiring like mad. And when you look at the job market, look, I'm not pretending there isn't a situation. Many of you are in the middle of your job search right now, probably going, Eric, I've looked, they're not out there. The jobs are there. You're gonna have to work very hard to get them, as you always would, but recognize that the industries that are affected were affected quite strongly, but many others weren't. And you're gonna have to find that. You have to get creative in where you look for jobs and look for things that would have been would have been affected positively by this, if you can think of anything as a positive effect in the last 6 or 7 months we've lived through. So pay attention to your local environment and the companies that are doing well and the companies that are laying off, and look at which segments of your because we're here in Oregon. I know what's doing well here in Oregon and what isn't, right? But in your state, in your city, look at what's doing well and what isn't. Look at public relations releases, or what's in the newspapers or magazines, and who it is that's like announcing really cool new things. And that, if that company itself isn't necessarily hiring, that sector will be hiring. All right, another thing to keep in mind about job searches in general, and this is hard to just wrap your wits around when you're first getting a job, you really are interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. You want a good fit. Now, there's a lot that can be said about this, and there's a lot of material on it, the job placement course. I'm only going to mention one example. As a new developer, one of the things that will usually help you in your career is if the company you're moving to, or joining as your first job, has a decently put together onboarding process where they help orient you to the company, its history, the principal business activities it's involved in, and the basic way that its technology departments work. In other words, how well do they orient you as you first come on board? And that experience, I'm here to tell you, is all over the map from company to company. That onboarding experience is sometimes fantastic and sometimes literally doesn't exist. Like, you have to run it. I can't tell you how many times I've started working a job, and if I didn't say anything to them, I'm firmly convinced that 2 weeks later I wouldn't have a computer, because no one else was saying anything to me, and I had to reach out and ask for it. And if I hadn't asked, well, what software tools do we use here? And do you have copies of them locally, or do I download them from their site? And it goes on and on and on. If I didn't drive the actual operation of onboarding myself, I don't know if it would have happened. But on the other hand, you go to a place like IBM, where I was working years ago, and they have a specific exact process for onboarding people, and they have all of their internal resources clearly located, and they tell you exactly what to install on your machines, and it was a great experience, right? When I say you really are interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you, this is just one example of a thing to look for. If they are able to easily experience an actual entry-level developer coming on board, and they've thought about, how do I make the experience for that person easier to go through, well, then that's a great place. If, on the other hand, they just have a lackadaisical attitude towards it, well, there's probably going to be a lot of other factors as to whether or not you're going to accept a job offer from them if they give you one. But I would weigh that one pretty heavily, because you are going to really want some good orientation when you first get started. So it's just one example of the fact that you really are interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. I know you want that job, and you feel like, man, I just got to get my foot in the door, and I've gotten 15 no's in the last week, and I want to beat my head against the wall, and I'm interviewing these people, and it seems like they're about to say yes. But if you have anything in the back of your mind where you're like, yeah, but what about that? Don't violate what you know to be true. All right. So another thing about doing the job search in general, there are actions you need to take, and you need to drill them. Now, for those of you not yet to the job placement course, you may not have 100% reality on what I'm talking about. Those of you who've done that course, you hopefully do. There are things like doing a phone interview, or doing an in-person interview, which we're not doing right now, or doing a whiteboard presentation where you're sketching something out in response to questions. There's code challenges you can do. Those things can be drilled. And especially during this time period where you're going to have to work your tail off to get this job, you really should lean into this hard. The job placement personnel are there for you. Probably, if you have any kind of decent social skills, you can work out a way with a fellow student who's also in the same part of the program with you towards the end, getting a job, to coordinate with you, to team up, to be able to drill these things. How you do it is up to you to figure out. But that drilling is key. Drill the interview over and over again. When you mess something up, figure out what you could have done better, and then drill the exact same thing over again. I got to tell you guys, I've been preaching this for about 8 years now in terms of the boot camp space. And the number of people who take me up on this, take it as a personal challenge, is unfortunately too small. I'm not kidding about this. The key to being professional at what you're doing in this, and getting a job is a professional activity, by the way, with its own set of skills and successful actions. The key to being very professional and competent to this is to drill what you're going to do over and over and over again, so you're very comfortable with it. Drill doing the interviews, drill doing those whiteboard presentations, drill doing those code challenges. All right, now, another thing that's really important on this job search in general, and obviously during this situation, is you've got to practice explaining how you think. How you think is much more important than the right syntax or the right exact technical answer. I'm not saying you can go into an interview and just whiff every single one of the questions, get them all wrong, and think that's going to go well. It's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that let's say you're the hiring manager. You're there as part of an interview. Assuming that the person has clearly gone through some kind of a program of education and answered, the majority of the questions that you asked them of a technical nature, adequately, what you're really looking for is, I need to get inside this person's head. I need to know how they approach problems, how they think in terms of analyzing a complex system, because software has many interrelated parts. How does this developer think? And you can demonstrate that without words by doing some coding, but you can also just tell them how you're thinking. And that's not something that all of us have a natural skill at. Many of us, especially with the type of schooling we've received over the years in this educational system, are afraid to think out loud on things. Because what if you say something and it ends up being wrong, and then the teacher, snaps at you and bites your head off, and all of your friends or so-called friends make fun of you. And look, we've all dealt with that stuff. That is not part of technology. The number of times you're going to get the answer wrong as compared to right is about 100 to 1. And I mean that not just verbally when you're doing some of these interviews, but I mean when you're actually coding. If you watch some of these online tutorials that'll teach you how to do certain coding things, and the instructor did a whole bunch of work ahead of time to make sure everything was perfect, and they lay it out and do it as one nice little happy path, and everything goes great. But when you're really making software, it does not go that way. You will get it wrong most of the time with your first attempt and have to figure out why. And every developer knows this, guys. We're under no illusions that we're all like some ninja rock star, gods or goddesses of coding. It's not true. The fact is we're wrong most of the time. But when we're wrong, we've got to figure out why, and that's where the magic happens. That's where you earn your money. And so your hiring manager is going to know that you can think. Not that you can get everything picture perfect with the technical question, that you can parrot off the answer to some technical thing. Again, yes, you're gonna have to get most of your specific technical questions. You should have a decent handle on them, but they're not gonna be really challenging for an entry-level developer. They're more interested in how you think. So practice that. When you're doing these things, practicing your interview, drilling your interviews, drilling presentations on a whiteboard or whatever, think out loud. Watch for the moments where you say something and then go, oh, wait a minute, that's not right. And notice that they happen often and that it's okay. And that part of you thinking out loud shows how you can recognize maybe that wasn't the right thing, roll back your thought process, pivot a little bit, and take another tack. That's what a hiring manager wants to see. It's so much more important than, oh man, this person got everything right the first time. I'll tell you a little story to illustrate that. I was in the Navy, I was operating nuclear reactors, and I was teaching people about nuclear power, electronics, heat transfer, fluid flow, a bunch of nerdy stuff, right? We had a guy that was a compatriot of mine, a peer of mine. We were both instructors. And this is the guy that we all looked up to. And part of the reason we looked up to him is that when he'd gone through the same training program we had, which was the Naval Nuclear Power School in Orlando, Florida at the time, it was then and is still now the most rigorous academic training program in all of the military. It's really tough to get through. I made it through. I did fine. I didn't like win any awards, but whatever. I could operate a nuclear reactor. This guy, Jerry O'Shaughnessy, he had the highest GPA of anyone who'd ever gone through the program since about 1963 when they started it. It was disgusting. The guy was a genius. And he was a horrible reactor operator. No one would work with him. He had every technical question and answer just right there, man, instantly. But he couldn't do the job. It was amazing. Like the guy had a mind like a steel trap and could memorize everything, but he couldn't actually do it. When you ask him to explain how to actually do a thing, or you give him like the reactor plant control panel where you'd run this reactor plant, man, he was just stuck. And I learned something really important on that. One, man, don't judge yourself by anybody else. I'm still working on that one. The other thing I learned is you can have accumulated knowledge, and that's one thing. But much more important is how to work with that knowledge, how to think. And especially for those of you who are listening to this, that are early on in your program, I'm happy for you actually that you're getting this right at the beginning. Keep this in mind as you go through the whole program. It's so much more important to know how to think than to have that exact technical answer on the tip of your tongue and look really awesome because you just snapped off the right answer. Okay, enough of that. All right. So some specific tips for today's job search. That was easy to say. So again, everything I just said is true about all the things in general during any time period, but life in the land of COVID and everything else we got going on. What is it you can look at specifically to help in today's job search? All right, so bear this in mind. I said it earlier, the job market is weak in a few select areas, but is strong in all others. So look for alternative areas. The fact is, most of the jobs in technology aren't in software companies. Everybody hears about all the software companies. Those are the big IT giants of the world. But almost every company needs technology workers. And you find them in the weirdest places. I had a graduate a couple, 3 years ago, was a personal friend of mine. I paid attention to him in terms of how things went and where he got hired. And his first job was for an HVAC company. Heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. HVAC. Like, dude, what did you do getting a job at HVAC? I was worried that you took a non-technology job. But the fact is, they had some in-house software, which was very valuable to them. They would bring in steel, raw steel in big giant rolls. And they would have to, use their manufacturing equipment to shape that into all the duct work that would go into a specific HVAC installation. And that steel was an expensive raw commodity. And so calculating the most efficient use of that to be able to get the most amount of duct work out of it and have the least, smallest amount of scrap that had to be thrown away or sent to the scrapyard to try to recoup some of your money, that was critically important. And so the software they used to do that was amongst the most important fiscal or financial elements of their entire company. And he got to work on that and work in a really neat, interesting sector where he was looking at, two-dimensional and three-dimensional usage of, creation of objects. It was fascinating. It was in HVAC. You never know where those jobs are. So cast a very wide net for the companies you look at. You need to get extremely good at virtual work and phone interaction. Now, this gets very mechanical. It's things like this. Become familiar with the online, meeting platforms like GoToMeeting or Zoom or Google Meet. There's several of them out there. If you have a chance to actually use those when you're doing some drilling back and forth of all of your, your interviews or, coding challenges or whatever you're being asked to do, whiteboarding. If you're drilling some of these things, use one of these online platforms and get comfortable with them. Get comfortable with being able to share your screen and control audio and it's a tool like any other. And it's not a tool that you're gonna have to use very often when we're in non-COVID times, but now it's the only way you're gonna get things done. So get very good at them. If you've got an opportunity, for example, to have a tablet, like I've got my iPad with the little pencil on it, and it took me a little while to figure out how to actually use that as a really decent whiteboard to make sketches. It wasn't a quick process, But now that I have it down, it's a blast. I can just quickly switch over to that, sketch out some little technical diagram, and talk while I'm doing it. And it was worth all the time I took to make, to figure out how that worked. You need to get very good at these things. Don't let the technology or the tools you're using to be able to communicate who you are and how you think and what you know. Don't let the physical challenges or barriers or tools you have to use ever get in the way of that person you're interviewing with seeing who you really are and getting that really good grasp of how you think. Become a competent user of all of these tools. So another thing that you're going to need to do is really increase your engagement with our team. Like, really be in communication. Respond to their communication quickly. Do what they ask you to do. I'm telling you, it breaks my heart and cracks me up at the same time to see students who are really upset about not getting a job push back and disagree with what the job placement personnel at the school are asking them to do. Do not be that guy or that girl. And I'm not saying it because, oh, Erik said it and he's the co-founder or whatever. I'm saying it because I care passionately about you guys getting through this and doing well. This is why we made the school. And we've done it over and over again with people, and we've learned the right things and the wrong things. And you just gotta get out of your way sometimes. If you're being asked to do something you're not comfortable with, or you think it's the wrong action or isn't going to work, you got to stop for a second and just ask yourself, how many times in my life have I successfully helped someone get hired in technology? For nearly every single one of you, that number is going to be 0. I'm not saying this to be an obnoxious jerk. I'm saying it because it's a very important thing to recognize the value of being humble on, the value of being teachable on. And there's a lesson to be learned right there in that last sentence. One of the key things that a hiring manager is going to be looking for as to whether they want to bring you on to be a permanent part of their team is, are you teachable? And a key part of that is, are you willing to be wrong? Are you willing to lose face? Are you willing to go, man, I was actually not doing that the right way? And I was humble enough to go, all right, there might be a better way, and then try it. If you are, man, I can't tell you how many guys have been wrong, or how many times I've been wrong, guys. It's almost embarrassing. The only reason it's not embarrassing is because look at how many things I've done that are right. The number I've done wrong is oodles above that. But I've done enough things right that I have a life that I love and I'm proud of, and I'm surrounded by wonderful people who are awesome. But man, I've done some really stupid things and I've been wrong lots. So I'm not saying you can just snap your fingers and just get over that kind of thing if it's been an issue for you. But I'm telling you that we do know what we're doing. Be very engaged with your team at the school here. It's really, really vital if you're going to get what you want out of it. Because recognize, if you're being directed or requested to do something by job placement personnel, it's not because it's their job to do that. It's because you need to get hired. That's why they're doing it. They're doing it purely and only for care and love and attention for you. May not see that in the moment, I understand, but work with them before you decide it doesn't work. All right. A second. Let's go back to this. Okay. You're going to have to get creative on networking. This is the one that's just a real challenge for everybody right now, guys. I totally got it. It used to be just go on meetup.com and find 5 or 10 different meetups in your city or your area and go check out some artificial intelligence thing, or people are making drones, or there's 17 different Python groups in your city or whatever, right? But that isn't true now. You have to get very creative on how you do this, right? So here's the thing. Ideas on getting creative on this. 1, start your own little online meetup. Just put something out on Craigslist or on any other LinkedIn or any other little message board you're on. If you're a gamer and you're on some kind of Discus server, just put something out and say, hey, is there anybody else out here who's a technology worker or knows people? And just get together and start talking to them. That goes under the heading of being willing to communicate a lot. You may very well have to, in terms of being creative, find the people who are running any of these online meetups. You know how, like, one of the things we've seen in recent feedback is people can find some of these virtual meetups, but then they're like, man, I don't know anybody here, and I'm not sure what I should ask or do or say. Well, get a hold of the person that runs the meetup and find out how you can help them. Doesn't matter what help it is. It could be like sending out emails to confirm that people are going to arrive, or working on some kind of promotional thing that gets sent out, or whatever it is. Find out who is running this thing and flow them some care, power, some love, some concern, right? Help them. It will come back to you. So this could mean a lot of different things to get creative on networking, but the principal thing is just be willing to communicate. Be willing to open up your mouth and say something. Look, I know it's not fun. We've all been that guy or that girl in the room where you open your mouth and you think you've got like a funny thing to say and just crickets. Or you think you've got a really decent, intelligent question and you ask it and people look at you, like you got dirt on your face, like that's the stupidest question in the world. That's not a lot of fun for anybody. But you know who I feel a lot sorry for? The person who was cowardly enough not to even open up their mouth and say anything. This falls into that same category of you're going to do a lot of things wrong and a lot of things right. Get used to it. This creative on networking thing is part of that. Put yourself out there and be willing to fail. Keep on doing it. Pick yourself up, and you're eventually going to find someone at the other end of that, whatever communication medium you're using, just like they resonate with you and you resonate with them and they're happy to talk with you and you find you have mutual interests and something will come out of it, but you've got to be tenacious. All right, so let's revisit these challenges that are like part and parcel of the bizarre world we're living in right now. Yeah, we've got the COVID thing. Totally got it. Don't know when it's going to go away. So big picture on this, just be willing to experience it. Don't keep thinking, as we all were at various points, oh, this will be over soon. I'm not wanting it to last a long time. Don't get me wrong. This is really awful, okay? But it is here right now, and it is the way we operate. So just operate that way and push through and succeed anyway. Get really good and creative at doing these online networking and meetups. Find a way you can be involved. Be part of the actual production, and then you become part of the discussion. I know jobs seem to want a ton of experience. Totally got it. Man, that isn't a COVID thing. That's always going to be true. And it's one of the chief fallacies of our entire industry that this persists after all these years, that the disconnect between what's actually needed on the job and what gets promoted as what they're looking for, I don't know if we're ever going to crack that. So ask for the job anyway. Throw your hat in the ring. Send your resume. Be willing to explain to them why it makes sense to hire you. Show them how you think. How though you may not know a ton of things yet in terms of practical experience, you do know what your most important qualities are, which is that I understand the fundamentals of programming and I know how to think like a software developer. If you can get that across, the decent right person who you would want to work for is going to love it. If they make you wrong for it, they're a jerk. You wouldn't want to work for them anyway. I'm not kidding. It happens very rarely in this industry, but every once in a while you get a person that's like really not a people person, is critical of others, and just a not nice person to talk to. It's very rare. But if it happens, man, you dodged a bullet. Because most people in this industry are awesome. They're very pragmatic. If you can do the job, they love you. They're creative, they're nerds, they're all over the map. They're great people. So there are definitely rumors about tech jobs declining. I don't even know what to say about this. This almost makes me laugh. I've heard rumors about tech jobs declining. I could be really flippant and put out questions about what sorts of psychotropic drugs a person might need to be on to think that's true. The job market for tech workers is insane. It's not going to go down for a very, very long time. You job search, and you're trying to make a career transition. This is just not fun. I got it. The rewards are worth it. The jobs are there. We're getting people hired left and right now. People are getting more remote jobs than we've ever had people hired for. I'm not saying it's become the new normal, but it is for right now. But no, tech jobs are not declining. You might look at one tiny sector and go, oh, look what happened there. But overall, yeah, people need tech workers. Now, hiring freezes. Yeah, absolutely. This might have happened. Here's a really important point about that. When a company does a hiring freeze, the need for the technology workers has not actually gone away. In fact, COVID has produced a lot of challenges for companies, and they've had to shift how they do a lot of things. And anytime you start changing the way a company does its core business, you need technology, because they've already got technology wrapped up in every facet of how they operate. Every part of the process, if it's manufacturing, everything from raw material acquisition to inventorying of finished product to sales and accounting and delivery and management of personnel, it's all computerized. It's all technologicalized. And then when you shift any fundamental part of that to adapt to the COVID-19 situation, all of your computer systems have to shift. And your technology workers were already handling their regular jobs, and we're already not meeting their deadlines, and we're already, like plenty of work to do. And now they've got more. So if a hiring freeze does happen, you better be sending your resume to those companies and making sure that you continually let them know you exist and you want to work for them. Because the moment that hiring freeze gets lifted, they are going to go ballistic. Like every single reason why they need more personnel has been like moving farther and farther up the organizational chart to the top. People really know, man, we maybe shouldn't have stopped hiring technology workers. So don't let that stop you. Send your communication anyway. So yes, remote education that you're doing limits interaction. Just get very competent and good at the tools that you have available to you, and get out there and communicate, whether it's an online meetup or whether it's with a fellow student who's going through the job search process, or whether it's one of your job placement personnel you're working with and you just want to like talk through the way you handled something in terms of a question you were asked on a job interview, or whether you want to get help setting up, drilling with someone. You've got to get out there. You've got to be like constantly communicating outwardly. Oh, by the way, I meant to mention this in terms of becoming competent with the tools. Please pay attention to your physical appearance and your environment where you are on virtual calls. Always control your environment. Make sure that the people around you, if you're at home, which a lot of us are, understand what you're doing and do not, interrupt you or mess up the environment or cause a bunch of noise. This is a professional activity, getting a job. And especially since a lot of us are doing things from home, it's really easy to not be that professional. So pay attention to that. All right, so what are the next steps I recommend to you? For those of you who are already onto and through the job placement course materials, review those. Look back over them. Look back over them willing to find things that you either didn't understand or need to be reinforced. Be willing to learn, even if you're reviewing them. Review whatever job search grid you have for any missed opportunities. And by the way, if you don't have a job search grid, if you don't have some kind of a document, preferably an Excel grid or at least a text document that's recording everything you're applying for and what's happened on it and what the next steps are. If you don't have one of those, man, if I could slap you through a computer, I would. You've got to be organized about this. It's critical. You'll rapidly reach the point where you have 20 or 30 or 40 different job applications, hopefully a lot more, in very rapid order that you're juggling. When I lost that job earlier in the year, which I didn't tell the full story of, I will. When I lost that job, I mean, look, I understood it. The company lost 95% of its revenue over a 5-week period. Right now, I'm in really good communication with the guy who was my boss's boss, like way up the chain. Everybody up to him got let go. It was brutal, right? I'll tell you what I did. Here I am. It's a Friday. It's 4:35. And I get a call from HR. And they said, hey, COVID has just decimated the company. We got to make some painful decisions, and we're going to let you go. By 8 o'clock that night, 3.5 hours later, I had 45 job applications put in. And I recorded every single one of them. And I scanned up and down through all of them every day. And I kept adding. So by the time it was maybe 5 or 6 or 7 days later, I had 180 job applications out. You can't tell me that you can maintain in your mind everything you need to do on every single one of those jobs for a list like that. If you don't have a job search grid and you're not working it industriously, what are you even doing? It's that important, and I'm being that blunt about it, because if our job placement personnel are working with you and they find that you're not even doing that minimal step of keeping track, man, there's a severe reality adjustment in your future if you want to get hired. So yeah, that was brutal, but I want you to succeed. And that's just fundamental to making this thing go right. All right. Work out how to drill and who to drill with on some of these key job search skills. Our job placement personnel are there for you. They can help pair you up with other students who are really interested in being, proactive about getting this thing going. And they've got all kinds of suggestions about what you can drill and, common interview questions and all kinds of stuff. This has all been worked out. It's there for you to do it. It's there for you to work through whatever embarrassment factor you have with being interviewed and stumbling and doing and ah, and I'm not sure. It's there for you, but you have to do it if you want to succeed through this. That leads me to the next thing. Find a partner or two to work with. Somebody you're comfortable talking to and who is willing to have you not do it right and not, jump all over you for it. Someone who's also willing to mess up and just learn this stuff. Find somebody like that you can trust. Set a daily goal for job search actions and commit to it. Now, job search actions can be all kinds of things. The most fundamental one is sending out a resume or whatever online application they're accepting. I know a lot of these platforms just let you do it with a couple clicks, right? That's the most fundamental one. If you set a daily goal for 25 job search actions, frankly, more than half of them should be sending the resume. And then the other ones are, well, I followed up on on a job lead that said they were going to get a hold of me 3 days ago, but it's been 4 days. I did an hour of coding exercises on one of these coding platforms that are there, testing platforms or learning platforms, whatever they are. Set that daily goal, commit to it, and get it done. It's your discipline. It's essential to build. If you don't have it, grow up, start to build it, and you'll find it just becomes a muscle. Like you'll find it very easy. Just keep doing a thing. And right there is when it's super important to be in communication with the job placement personnel. It's when you were doing it and you were doing all right, and then you fell down a little bit on the job. That's when you need to be in communication. That's not the time to be embarrassed about it or avoid them or think that it's not, they've got some other agenda or whatever. Get in communication with them, stay in communication with them, and you will make it. And by the way, I know I'm being very blunt in some of this communication. I don't apologize for it. I'm being this blunt because we know what it takes to get the job, and we know how rewarding it is when you do. And if you're finding it challenging to do so, there's going to be something you're going to have to change. We're doing everything on our end at the school. I tell you what, I'm so proud of our job placement personnel. They care so much. They're so willing to work hard. They're so willing to own up when there's a better way they could have done things. And I know that they're doing everything they can on that end of it. And you're the other side of that. If you are 100% responsible for getting your job, and the school is 100% responsible for you getting that job, we both approach it from that point of view, we'll do great. We'll do fantastic. But that requires a level of teamwork, cooperation, and communication that's quite high. It's worth it. And This brings me to one of the final points. When something doesn't go great, review what happened with job placement personnel. Yeah, they'll commiserate and feel bad with you and for you for a while. Of course, it stinks when you get that no. You really thought it was going somewhere, and they call you and tell you they went in another direction. Oh man, that's not fun. Okay, but you pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and you call your job placement person and say, "Listen, here's what happened. Stinks. Yeah, I know. Let's review all the communication I had back and forth with that company, the actions I took. Let's spot anything I could have done to have that be a better experience." Or maybe you find out in that conversation, wow, ultimately that really wasn't actually a good fit for me, and I can just move on, and it's good. But review those things. Don't just like go, well, that stunk, and then, move on. All right, so some closing remarks. It's really critical. COVID's not going to be the last challenge in your job search you'll encounter. There's always going to be something. Man, I tell you what, 2008, you want to be a technology worker in 2008 when we had our financial crash? Some of you are young and didn't live through that or watch your parents kind of live through it. It was brutal, man. It was really brutal. And yet, the tenacious among us who are technology professionals found a way to keep working through that. There will be other things. Life is tough. It takes a tremendous amount of fortitude and tenacity, mental toughness, stick-to-itiveness to make it through life and to succeed really well. Luckily, you've chosen a career that when you do have that approach to life, it's very rewarding. But it still needs to be there. So just acknowledge that. This isn't the last time you're going to face something like this. There it is. Your mental toughness, your self-confidence, that's your greatest asset. Yes, that's built up over time with having a record of like besting the challenges that life faces you. But I want to point out that by getting through this program, you've already demonstrated a tremendous amount of mental toughness and self-confidence. It isn't easy to learn everything you've learned. By the way, if you're in that job placement portion of your program, I welcome you to just go back in and review all of the things you've learned. This is actually probably a really good idea for some of you, because it's so easy when you're doing these jobs, interviews, and you look at all the things you don't know. Oh my God, there's a lot of them. And you do a technical interview and you're like, man, 7 of the 10 things they asked me, I'm like, I don't know. It can happen. It's happened to me. It's not a lot of fun. So it can be worthwhile to just look back and just please recognize how awesome you are. If you got through this program and you're in the job placement section, you're an amazing person. That takes hard work and dedication. Excuse me, hard work and dedication and mental toughness. And you have to modify the way you think. You've got to change the way you think. It's not like you're just learning, how to fix a gear on some mechanical piece of equipment, which I'm not disparaging, but you've changed the way you think by getting through this program. So just recognize what you're capable of. Don't ever lose sight of it, and have that be what you bring into each of these interviews. And that's the final thing there. You do have what it takes to get hired. You do have what it takes to do a great job. It isn't always a matter of the exact right technical information. It's a matter of how do you think and how tough are you? How willing are you to just keep at it until you solve something? And how willing are you to ask for help in solving a thing and just get the job done? Because at the end of the day, in a technology department of any sort, that's what actually matters. Hey guys, girls, did we get the job done? Woo, great. That's what actually matters. So that's my presentation for the day. I hope you enjoyed it very, very much. I just want to, again, reiterate, your job placement personnel are there for you. And I highly recommend that you take advantage of their help. They're awesome, awesome people. Thank you for your time. Have a great evening and good night.
All right, good stuff, Eric. That was a great talk, inspiring.